This week on SabreTalk, we're laying out our plans for the rest of the year. We're joined by wrestler and Twitch streamer Aspyn Rose, who's here to teach us about trails in the sky and how not to break your ass while fighting in a bar. Professional wrestle me right now. This is SabreTalk episode 4. Hello everyone and welcome back to SabreTalk. I am of course the pro wrestling VTuber dedicated to love and justice, Kit Saberfang. And I don't have too much to yap about this week, so please allow me to pepper y'all with some Saber Gang updates before we get to our interview with Miss Aspyn Rose. And this was another fun interview to put together, as I'd mentioned on last week's episode that Aspyn was someone who's been very supportive of me as a creator, always friendly in my Twitch chats, always sharing my work on other platforms. It's something I certainly always appreciate from everyone. And as I pointed out to her after our interview, she's also one of the only wrestlers that I know of who actually follows and supports me out there. It's really them and Kid Bandit, who is also someone who comes up during our conversation. And quite honestly, that's really fantastic company to be in. And it's not really something I think too much about because in everything I do, I'm making a conscious decision to do it from this side of the barricade. You know what I'm saying? And I'm glad I made this connection with Aspyn because she's got a really interesting punk rock story to tell within pro wrestling. She's worked a lot of wild shows, she's gotten to meet her heroes in the ring, and the stuff she's doing now in West Virginia is just so different, so cool. It really reminds me a lot of the Baka Gaijin and even 666 shows that you see out in Japan. And it's the kind of out of left field shows that I think could find an audience here in America. We get into all of it, of course, including a great discussion about the history of Shimmer, its legacy, and what it's like being someone who wrestles a lot of intergender matches, which is always a hot topic. And I think Aspyn touches on a few points from a performer's perspective that I hadn't really considered. And as someone who is already on board with just letting everyone wrestle anyone that they want to wrestle, it gave me some new elements to think about, especially in regards to the logistics of how one gets started on that path to begin with. Anyways, it's a great conversation and I hope you all enjoy it. So stick around for that and give Aspyn a follow on all her channels in the description of this show. Okay, some quick Saber Gang updates. I don't know what's going to be on next week's episode of SabreTalk, but I can tell you what will be on the 2 after that. It's kind of a weird situation I've gotten myself in, but I'll figure out that first part soon enough. But in 2 weeks' time, I will have a new road report for y'all, fresh from Deadlock Pro's 4th anniversary show, which will also be their final show for the foreseeable future. That report should also come with some new tech upgrades, as I'll be upgrading to the latest iPhone this week, which will give me a better camera to work with for these shows that I can't lug my Fujifilm to. I was also recently gifted a lapel mic setup for my phone, and the difference in audio quality is completely nuts. I am deeply appreciative for that little upgrade. And so yeah, moving forward, those segments should be looking and sounding a lot better. Finally, something else that's on my mind. If you're listening to this and you haven't joined the Saber Gang Discord yet, what are you waiting for? It's been a lot more active recently, and just last night, a bunch of us got together in VC to watch IWRG's weekly show from Arena Nakipan, and that's always fun enough. And I don't want to blow up anyone's spot here, but someone introduced their partner to everyone to hang out. And honestly, that is just so cute. And this is also someone who is new to wrestling themselves, bringing someone who they introduced to wrestling. And it's just so fucking cute. And it fills me with such pride knowing that we've really created a space that people feel comfortable introducing their friends to, and also a space that is so welcoming to people newer to pro wrestling. It's really why I started this whole journey to begin with. I'm someone who I never felt like I fit into most wrestling communities, as I found most of them to be either too weirdly aggro, too gatekeepy, too cliquish, just kind of weird incel vibes all around, and very few of them comfortable for queer people to exist in. And so I'm just really glad to see that, at least in our small little way, we've helped make that space come to life. So thank you to everybody who makes our Discord one of their online homes. And if any of this sounded appealing to you, then I'd welcome you to check it out in the description below. All right, I said I didn't have a lot to yap about, but once again, I get going and it can be hard to stop. So let's hop on over to that interview with Aspyn Rose. And again, please do check out their socials in the description below and enjoy. I gotta know, as a fellow JRPG enthusiast, tell me about why you love Trails in the Sky And
Oh,
where
God.
should someone and where should someone who's never played these games before jump in? I am asking for myself.
For myself. Well, I mean, if you wanted me to yap, that's quite a first question.
What is it about this here? Because I have friends who are into it as well, but I do know that people who are into Trails, it's serious. You got to be super into it. You got to play all the games. Tell me about it. Like, what is that like as a Trails fan?
I think initially the big thing that does it for me, and usually the way I like describe it to people who haven't played it, it's as if Final Fantasy was just one continuous story and not just like different versions of something. So one game goes into another, goes into another, goes into another, whereas like more than half of the Final Fantasy games are all standalone. They might have like reoccurring game mechanics, and like there's always a Cid, but it's always a different guy named Cid. Whereas Trails will literally have the same character in like 9 games. There's two NPCs named Anton and Ricky, who are just two random people that travel together. And during the course of the games, after the first one, they like somehow get separated from each other. And so the whole game, the rest of them is you seeing where they've lost themselves. Sometimes they get reunited, sometimes they don't, but they're NPCs. Like you literally hardly ever notice them if you don't really pay attention and talk to NPCs. But yeah, like all the games are connected, and the 13th one, I think that's the number we're on, comes out in January.
They just did like a big remake of the original, right?
Yeah. So that was a big deal. So when I initially got into it, I played Trails of Cold Steel, and I bought it on a whim during PlayStation does like an annual like big in Japan sale. And I had played another Falcom game, which is the developer. And I had played one of their other games that was like a standalone game. And I was like, oh, let me see what other games they have. And Trails of Cold Steel was on there. I was like, okay, this seems fun, but it has like way bigger of a story. And so I just bought it on a whim. And then I really enjoyed it, and I started getting into it, and I Googled it, and then I found out there was all these other ones previous that I hadn't played. And so Trails of Cold Steel is like in the middle of the series. But at the time, so this was like end of 2019 into 2020. And at the time, the Sky games and the 2 games that take place in Crossbell didn't have a actual English version unless you had a PC. So the Sky games were on Steam, where it was all in English, but there was no voice acting with it. You only got voice acting if you bought the Japanese one. And then the 2 Crossbell games at the time technically didn't even have an actual English version. You had to buy them and then get a mod patch that the Trails community had made themselves to make it English. There's a whole community they called themselves the Geo Front, which is like, of course, in relation to the games. And they would translate all the Japanese versions of the games into English, because for a hot minute, the English releases were like 3 years behind. So they would be getting, say, like the 8th game, and we'd just be getting like the 6th game. That's how far behind it was. So there was like a whole like community of just Trails fans who would translate everything so that everybody could play it at the same time. But the cool thing about the games with all the different stories is I kind of describe it as like how Naruto has different arcs in his story, and there's different parts of the whole show. That's kind of how the game is. So like there's the Sky games, which is the first 3, and then the 2 Crossbell games, which are the 2 in the middle, and then Cold Steel is after that, and there's 4 games. And then Daybreak are the 2 that just came out, and then we have the new one coming in January. But they all take place in different countries in the same continent. And the time periods sometimes like overlap. So while you're playing like the last of the Crossbell games, at the same time, Trails of Cold Steel is technically starting. So you start to see it all connecting together, and they do so many like callbacks. There's characters from games you haven't seen since the first one. And then they did the Sky remake that just came out. And it's like a full 3D remake, and everything's voice acted, everything's updated. But for me, I've always told people, as long as you start at the beginning of one of the arcs, I think you're fine. Yeah. Like, I wouldn't say to like start on Trails of Cold Steel 3, But I would also hope that, like, if somebody sees a number 3 in the title of a game, that they probably wouldn't pick that one first. But that's always been my thing. There's, of course, going to be the crazy internet people that'll tell you can only play it if you play it in order. But I didn't play it in order, and I understood it pretty well because they do help you explain things. Most of the time, you just miss, like, callbacks or Easter eggs that reference previous games. But for the most part, they kind of explain it pretty well, because even though stuff does slowly get connected, each one still kind of has its own story anyways. So you're really just following those characters in that specific point in time. I played Cold Steel first, and then for a while, because at the time I didn't even have a PC, I just went on YouTube and I was just watching people's videos about it so I could get like a general understanding of what was happening. And then when I started streaming in 2022, the first thing I want to do is, like, I have a PC, I can now get Steam, and I can get these games and I can play them in order. And so even now, whether I played the older ones for the first time, or even when I've been doing a second playthrough of the Cold Steel games, but like my first time streaming them, I'm still picking up on things that I missed the first time. Or because now I have more awareness of the previous titles, I'm noticing things that I didn't see the first time. And so it still feels like I'm getting a new game experience. And I kid you not, especially with the current releases, I put like 100 hours into these games before I even beat them.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So very traditional JRPG in that sense.
Yes.
And that, like, you can easily dump like 70 hours into this and not even notice it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. My original playthrough of Trails in the Sky, I think when we looked at it, when I started playing the remake, my original playthrough, I think it took us like 40 to 50 hours. But now in the remake, I think when we just finished it like a week ago, I think we did almost 80 hours.
Oh, wow.
But I also, that's like a positive with the remake, and there's plenty of positives. There's some negatives, but most of the negatives are just like me nitpicking.
Thank you so much for that thorough explanation. Explaining it to me in terms of Naruto arcs really does help, because I would go on Steam and I would see Trails of Cold Steel, Trails of Daybreak, and I'd be like, oh, these must be spin-offs or whatever. No, it's just it's just they slightly rename so you know which arc you're in. Okay, that really does help. And it's funny that you mentioned that Falcom publishes those games, because when you first initially started describing it, like, oh, you're following these characters from game to game and it's this continuous story, I'm like, I wonder if she's played Ys. So
the funny thing is I've only played a demo of 2 of the Ys games, but I've never gotten into them. I don't know if it was just like the combat I didn't really like. Granted, like the newer Trails games, they've updated it where now it's like a combined combat where you can do it as open action or you can do it turn-based.
It's kind of like, yeah, this is an action RPG, and it's like the Ys fans would tell you that's because it's like they invented this genre and that's why it's this way. It's like,
yeah. Sure.
I'm sure. What is your all-time favorite JRPG?
I mean,
if you had to pick.
Because we're talking about Trails, if I pick a specific Trails game, I usually go with Trails in the Sky the Third, which for any Trails fans is usually like not the choice, because, and I remember when I was getting into the games and initially starting the original Sky games, there would be people here and there that would be like, oh, you can skip Sky the Third. It's like the filler arc. You don't need it. Like, it's the filler arc, but it has all the story for the previous and games after that. Like, it's the most story heavy one to me, especially because you get a lot of backstory on some of like even like the villains in the game.
Yeah, it's like a bridge game. Because
of the story specifically, I always say Sky the Third is my favorite Trails game. But like all time, just because it's a game that I've played multiple times, is usually Kingdom Hearts. I was a big Kingdom Hearts kid.
The original.
Yeah.
That is my favorite of the series. It is still the original Kingdom Hearts. I am one of those fans who I like the Kingdom Hearts series, but I do feel like the further it goes on, the more it strays from God's light, you know, in terms of like,
I mean, it happens all the time.
Yeah, I like the Disney stuff. Whenever a new Kingdom Hearts game comes out, I'm like, why does the Disney stuff keep feeling less and less important? Like, I want that.
It's like the Disney stuff gets less important, but then also like the Square Enix stuff gets less important.
Yeah.
Because like in the earlier ones, we were getting Cloud and Zack and Aerith and Squall appearances, and then we get Kingdom Hearts 3 and there's nobody.
Yeah, I'm sorry, the boys from Final Fantasy 15 didn't pop off, but like, I'm sure Lightning could have came in, popped in here at some point, Yeah, Lightning should have been in Kingdom Hearts. She seems perfect for those games.
Or we would just get our comedic relief of like Prompto and Donald Duck having an argument or something.
You recently watched some wrestling on your channel. You watched, and I had to look this up, the Jeff Peterson Memorial Cup from 2004.
So actually, we didn't end up watching that.
I saw you watching something in a gym.
We were watching wrestling, but we couldn't watch the Jeff Peterson Memorial Cup because obviously I have a fancy gaming PC and I was using my PlayStation because it's a DVD that I own. I have a bunch of old wrestling DVDs. And I guess with having a capture card, you can't watch a DVD and use your capture card at the same time.
Yeah, that's an HDCP compliance issue there.
And so we couldn't find it anywhere besides, like, there was a YouTube channel that had matches from it, but they were all over the place. And then I would have to sit there and have Cage Match up to tell me the order. And also they were uploaded to YouTube like 10 years ago, so the quality was probably not even as good as my DVD. And so we ended up similar enough. We watched an IWA Mid-South show from 2004.
Why that era? Why that region? What is the correlation there?
If we were going to watch the Jeff Peterson Memorial Cup, that was like a Florida thing. That was like an FIP thing. And I'm originally from Florida. So like Florida indies, old Florida indies that I missed when I wasn't into wrestling have always appealed to me. I've also just been a sucker for old indie wrestling to begin with. A running thing when I was in my first year of training, I trained with Jay Lethal. And this was like leading into ROH's like actual partnership with New Japan. So like I started training probably a handful of months before that happened. So before they started having their partnership, New Japan was just its own thing and you had to like seek it out and all this stuff. And so whenever stuff was going on, nobody else would know wrestling that was happening unless it was like WWE or TNA, where Lethal would come over to me and be like, oh my God, did you watch Wrestle Kingdom last night? I'll be like, yes, I watched Wrestle Kingdom, and like we would talk about it. And so like if there was anything happening in indie wrestling, Jay would know that I probably watched it. And I've always just loved old indie wrestling, especially because 90% of the time it's ridiculous, or it's matchups that you never thought happened, or it's bad, or all of the above. And old IWA Mid-South is just ridiculous because it's got like every random person you could think of. Like literally the semi-main event that we watched had Nigel McGuinness versus CM Punk on it because why not? In an armory of like 30 people in the middle of nowhere in Illinois or something, I think it was.
And Nigel had a confusing shirt. It had a lot of messages on it.
It did. It said something about how the shirt belonged to Nigel and had like a fake piece of tape on it. But then again, it's Nigel, and this was literally 2004 when I feel like nobody's wrestling shirts made any sense. They were just throwing things on a t-shirt and be like, yep, that's my merch. But yeah, mid 2000s indie wrestling has just always appealed to me because like all the DVDs that I have are ROH DVDs, mostly from like 2004 to like 2007. And so I was like, a random IWA Mid-South show where I don't know what's on it, this is going to be great to watch. And it was quite a time. Like we counted that Ian Rotten interrupted the show at least 4 times to talk on a mic, because that's a running joke, is seeing how many times Ian will get on the mic and how many times he'll put himself over.
Oh God. Is that one of the Nasty Boys?
No. No, Ian Rotten is just a guy that runs IWA Mid-South that's just a dude that's been in indie wrestling for too long and everybody just knows his shenanigans. Most of it is not good. But it's indie wrestling, so it's a lot of it's also just him putting himself over all the time. So like I said, the semi-main was Nigel versus CM Punk. CM Punk had the IWA Mid-South title at the time. Okay, so then you're like, okay, what the heck was the main event? Ian Rotten booking himself in a steel cage tag match. And bleeding in the first 2 minutes. Yeah.
What a worker. You gotta respect the carnyism of it all.
Yep. That's literally, like, if you want to talk about carny indie wrestling, that is IWA Mid-South. But with some bangers on their shows, so sometimes you just deal with it.
And also of that era, you're a big Shimmer fan, are you not?
Yes, I am. I don't know if you could tell.
Yeah, I did see. Yeah, I you know what's so funny is I had to specifically look up like your Instagram to like find. I was like, I know I've seen her like in her room. She had like a Shimmer poster. I remember thinking like, oh, like that's so cool. Can you describe Shimmer a bit and like the significance behind that promotion for those who just like might not be aware of it? 'Cause I feel like it is kind of a promotion that's a bit lost to time.
I feel like it's going the way of kind of just being like this magical thing that happened at one point in time. But Shimmer was like truly the place for women's wrestling that wasn't on TV. Like, it's a whole women's promotion. And when they were running, a lot of their shows were like mid to late 2000s. And so at that time, an all women's show was like, what? This is insanity. This was obviously WWE and all that wasn't doing anything. And now a lot of the girls that we see on TV, a good chunk of them have come from Shimmer. Mm-hmm. So like we've got Bailey, we've got Becky Lynch, we've got Candice LeRae. We've got so many different people that have been all over. And the thing with Shimmer that I think why it also appealed so much is because they had storylines here and there, but they would also film a whole weekend. So they would run on like a Saturday and Sunday, and you would get 2 shows each day. And so there would be like some stories here and there, but they usually only ran like 2 times a year. But I think the big appeal of it too was that was where we really started getting international talent, especially for women, because they were bringing people over from the UK and they were bringing girls from Mexico and girls from Japan. And that's where everybody was getting to meet and just getting to watch all these amazing women's wrestlers, whether it was somebody like an Asuka who was already amazing and a legend in her own right. But then you would also get like Bailey in the first like 2 years of her career before she was doing anything. And so especially getting into wrestling and having to work through indie wrestling as a woman, like, luckily for me, when I was training, we had some girls in and out that would help us with training. But a lot of the times you were just getting trained by a dude, which, no offense, but the way women wrestle and the way that we can do things will be different than a man. And even on the dumb things, like, we're going to take advantage of a girl having long hair. That's the thing that's going to happen. It was so much better having a perspective from another woman in the business. And so watching wrestling, especially in that era when you were only getting a women's match on TV, as opposed to like 8 to 10 men's matches multiple times a week, Shimmer was like it, because you could watch a whole 2 to 3 hour show and it was all women. And you would get a little bit of everything. You would get somebody like a Kaylee Ray who was doing swantons off the top rope. You would get somebody like a Portia Perez and a Nicole Matthews who were like super technical, but also really good bad guys. Or you'd get somebody like Jessie McKay who was really good, but also just really happy to be here. And so having that to watch and not just be like, and granted, I love all my old indie wrestling. I love watching my Bryan Danielson matches and my Nigel McGuinness matches, but also getting to go back and see all the women that were all able to come together. That fact that there was that many women that could come in together to do these shows multiple days in a row was like a mind-boggling thing. And so it was always something for girls getting in indie wrestling and coming up in wrestling to kind of like strive for, or at least like get inspiration and like learn something from, because you at least could be like, hey, regardless of anything, I know that there's a place that I can go that I will get treated with respect, that I will get to do what I love to do and get to showcase it to a whole room of fans that are going to appreciate it and not just be there to talk about how good I look or whatever. Mm-hmm. But Shimmer was great. I got to go. I've only been to one Shimmer show. It was Mania week, like 2014, 2015. One of the New Orleans weekends. I was a ticket girl for the Dragon Gate shows that weekend. And so Shimmer was running with them. And so they were like, hey, you're the only girl that's here helping out with the show, so don't worry about doing tickets. You can go watch the Shimmer show. And so I got to see, I remember the one specifically I watched was Dakota Kai, or Evie at the time, against Hikaru Shida. And that was Shida's debut in Shimmer. And I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. I'm like, I don't need to see anything else. Like, I just saw Hikaru Shida wrestle in Shimmer for the first time. I'm set. So yeah, Shimmer has just always been important to me. And I've just loved all the different styles and the different women that have been able to come through there. I love Shimmer. I would love for it to come back. I'm not going to get my hopes up because wrestling is wrestling. And I feel like indie wrestling's in a weird state again where who knows what's going to happen, especially with America being America. Even though I never got to be a part of it, I will forever be grateful for Shimmer.
Shout out Canadian Ninjas. I had to talk about Shimmer because for me, I remember being aware of, okay, there are women's promotions, like women's only promotions in Japan. I knew that was a thing. But yeah, in America, like you said, you're lucky if you get one match per show. And this was certainly during that post Diva Search era of WWE programming, where it was really going in that very looks maxing area of wrestling. And so seeing Shimmer was very much, for me, it was the inspiration to just seek out women's only wrestling, period, because it was like, right, like not only is this still a thing in different territories, but like it can be something here. And you still see the impacts of Shimmer in promotions that, oh God, you know, speaking of struggling in indie promotions, I was about to bring up one that you had worked with, Kitsune. You see it in the way that a lot of these, I think people kind of call them like American Joshi promotions, right? Because a lot of these promotions are bringing in a lot of overseas talent. But, you know, promotions like Kitsune and Spark Joshi, right? They are that rare breed of women's only promotions. And so you worked for some Kitsune shows. Yeah, tell me about that. Like, what was that locker room like compared to your typical indies, you know?
I love Kitsune. Kitsune will always hold a special place in my heart. Getting to do those shows, and this is the like random thing of advice that I guess I would give to anybody like wanting to wrestle or anything like that, this is going to be such a shocking thing to say, but it's going to be just be a nice person, because it's crazy what that could actually do for you. Me getting to do the Kitsune shows was a big deal for me because I got to be on their first show and I did a handful of them after that. But it literally happened because of Mania Week in LA a couple years ago. So I was doing the Pandemonium Pro Wrestling, which was in Burbank / LA when I was doing them. The Mania Week in LA, I was doing the show and they were having essentially like a big scramble / rumble thing. And it was basically just like, let's see how many amazing wrestlers we can put all in one match at the same time. It's Mania. Why not, right?
Right.
And leading into it, this was when Kid Bandit was helping like put together matches and stuff like that with them. Because Kid Bandit was the one who got me doing Pandemonium in the first place. I get a message from her and she's like, hey, we have somebody coming from Japan. We want to stick her with you just so that she has somebody she can kind of stick around and be comfortable with, because we don't know who she's going to know here besides like the person that's bringing her over.
Responsibility, buddy.
And they're like, do you know Aki Asakawa? And I'm like, do I know Aki Asakawa? Do I need to pull up my Tumblr page from 2014?
Right, that was the Mania weekend. I was like, it was Act's big kind of comeback.
Yeah. So, and they were like, yeah, we want to put her with one of the other girls so that she has someone to be with the whole time. And we thought that you would be a good fit. And I go, no offense to literally anybody else on this card, but I guarantee you most of the other people would not know the legend that they are about to have right now. I go, so before I started wrestling, and even like my first year when I was training, I was a big Tumblr kid. And so my Tumblr page was just filled with me reposting wrestling stuff all the time. And I was a huge Oedo Tai fan. I have loved them since they showed up in Stardom, and that was my stable. That was who I loved. And Act was one of the founding members. And when everything happened with her in Japan and when she stopped wrestling, I was like, man, it would be really cool to meet her one day, but that's probably like all that's ever going to happen. And then so when I get this message from Ken Bandit being like, do you know Aki Asakawa, aka we're going to have you guys team together? And I'm like, I was like, 15-year-old me is freaking out right now. I'm like, I get to, not only do I get to team with her, this is the first time she's wrestled in America in like 10 years, if not longer. And this is kind of like her actual return to wrestling outside of Act Wrestling Girls and doing all of those shows where they do like a little bit of everything. And so I was like, oh my God. And so I teamed with her for the show, and Eric is the guy that runs Kitsune. He had a podcast called The Joshi Pod where he just talked to women's wrestlers and mostly a lot of the girls from overseas. And so when it came time and he wanted to run a promotion, that was like his big thing, was wanting to bring a lot of the international girls that hadn't had the chance to come and wrestle over here, especially because Shimmer wasn't running anymore.
Right.
And wanted to get a lot of the girls who probably never thought they would get to wrestle in America. And me getting on those shows literally happened because he was like, you were so thoughtful and caring and just made sure Act was okay with everything. You were super nice. She loves you. Like, I couldn't have asked for a better person to be helping her out that weekend. And so like from literally just being a nice person is what got me on all those Kitsune shows.
You mean you didn't throw her under the bus and say,
no, I didn't throw anybody under the bus. I didn't step on anybody. I know.
You didn't try and convince her that, listen, the people out here in America, they love giant baba. If you go out there and do baba chops, they're gonna go nuts.
It's such a revolutionary thing to just be a decent human being to somebody. And so, yeah, Eric, from day one, he was like, you were somebody that was going to be on these shows because of how amazing you were with her. And I was like, well, granted, the fact that Aki Asakawa is like probably legitimate, like one of like the actual people like I fully looked up to and was like a legend to me. But also in general, it could have been anybody and I would have treated them exactly the same because that's just me as a person, I guess. And apparently that's crazy in wrestling to be a decent person.
It's interesting that you point out that one of the big things for Kitsune was to try and bring out girls who haven't been able to wrestle overseas. And yeah, that makes so much sense when I look at, their champions of Yuna Manase, Unagi Sayaka, bringing out Tei Honma a lot. Yeah, that totally tracks.
Yeah, they brought Tay out for their last show so that she could have another show in America before she retired. And I was like, come on now. Like, that's such an amazing thing to do for people and give these girls a chance to do something. Like, just how, like, so many people here would want to wrestle internationally. Mm-hmm. Other people in other countries probably want to do the same thing. And especially, I feel like, even though obviously wrestling has progressed so much, even in the last like 10 years, especially when it comes to women's wrestling, I'm still sure that a lot of the girls that are not in America don't think that they can get opportunities like that because that's not normally a thing. And like I said, without Shimmer being around, that chance probably plummeted of them ever getting to come over here unless they fully did everything themselves. And then even then, because of how crazy travel restrictions and visas and all this stuff are, who knows if it would have happened. So yeah, Kitsune was like making sure they were properly taken care of and that they didn't have to have any issues coming over here. And so Kitsune will always be important to me because I got to team with Aki Asakawa multiple times because of them. I got to be on shows with people like Risa Serra. I got to meet Kyoko Kimura. I got to be on a show with Bull Nakano, or not Bull. I got to meet Bull Nakano. I got to be on a show with Aja Kong. Like, it's craziness that so many things happen because of me doing Kitsune show, which just goes back to me being nice. I took a photo with Aja Kong. I'm like, this is insanity. You would have told me 10, 15 years ago, yeah, you're going to team with Aki Asakawa multiple occasions. You're going to be on a show with Aja Kong. You're going to meet Kyoko Kimura, who's the other founding member of Oedo Tai. Mm-hmm. You're going to... On your way to said Kitsune show, you're going to stop at a Ralph's in LA so Aja can get some snacks. And you're just going to see her just casually dressed going into a American grocery store. Like, I never would have believed any of that would happen.
You probably would have been like, Aja's still wrestling?
Right? I don't even have to wrestle. I'm just happy to be here.
But it makes me think about how I remember, when I started getting into indie wrestling, like, in the early 2000s, I would read stories about how, like, Minoru Suzuki came to a Ring of Honor show and didn't get the reception he liked. And so he didn't come back for, like, 10 years to the US because, oh, like nobody really knows who I am over here. It's not a big deal. But now I feel like that perception has changed so much for so many overseas talent, where now I think they really are starting to recognize like, oh, we do have a lot of fans overseas. And so I just think it's so cool that, now we are, well, up until some of the recent issues you talked about it with visas and travel restrictions, it is cool that we do get to see more overseas talent here in the US. And that is some of my favorite moments in wrestling, is going to a TJPW show in the US and just seeing the reception they get, and you see their face light up of just like, oh my God, like I have so many fans here. And it's like,
right. Yeah.
And it's just so cool. I love that. Some of the shows that you've been on recently, you have been on some of these negative outlook shows out in West Virginia, which I described last week as like these combination of no ring wrestling shows at bars that also feature burlesque performances and like hardcore bands. Tell me a bit about these shows and how did you get booked on these?
I love Negative Outlook. To me, it's in the middle of nowhere, West Virginia, but like it's near like the college area. So obviously there's plenty of younger people that are going there for the punk shows and stuff like that. But also I just feel like in general, when it comes to wrestling or even indie wrestling, West Virginia is, I feel like, not really a state or an area that people really think about.
Yeah, no, I do struggle to think of shows or like, wrestlers you hear coming from West Virginia. And it sounds like they're doing it way different.
Yeah, so I've done no ring shows before. 2019, was it 2019? Maybe it was 2018. I was doing a handful of the No Peace Underground shows, which were no ring shows that were running out of Orlando, Florida. I was just a valet. I was just a manager. And granted, I would do some stuff, but like I wasn't having like full on matches. And so I've experienced them before. I don't mind doing them. To me, they're fairly easy as long as they're not getting too crazy with like glass and all those shenanigans.
How do you prepare to wrestle without a ring beyond just how do I do this without breaking my ass on the floor?
To me, I feel like for the most part, it's honestly easier because I feel like you're not having to think as much of putting anything together. And yes, like obviously there are restrictions. I'm personally not going to want to do a hook, line, and stunner because I'm not going to throw my butt on a hard floor. Right. I'm not going to do that. But you're not having to think about it as much because also, especially shows like that, at least in my experience and the ones that I've done, you're not getting like the crazy internet wrestling fans. You're getting probably half of that crowd might not even watch wrestling. They're just there to hang out and have a good time and get into whatever's going on. They just want to see y'all beating each other up. They don't care what happens. And so to me, a lot of the times that can be easier because I feel like it's not as much pressure. Especially in the last match that I had there were two other guys in my match. So like me being the only girl on the show, I was already winning at life because they thought it was the coolest thing that this girl was coming out in this bar and beating up some dudes. Already 10 times easier on me. But yeah, I've done no ring shows before, and Negative Outlook I think started running about a year-ish ago, and about this time last year I did my first show for them, and I wrestled Journey Burke, another amazing women's wrestler out of the Northeast Philly-ish area, and I got booked on a whim because my friend Toddy Tondera, who is a commentator, he does like Be Young's like 880 shows and Enjoy and all that stuff. Okay. And he was like, hey, I've been helping out at these no ring shows in West Virginia, and they want to start having some girls on and stuff like that. And you have experience doing bar shows. Would you want to do one? I said, sure, why not? Easy. And I met the owner, Marcus, and he's great. They just really take care of us there. But like, I think to me, because I had done No Peace Underground before, it was giving me flashbacks to how No Peace shows originally were when they were running in Orlando, because they kind of did a similar thing where the No Peace shows would go on after some sort of performance at the bar. Whether it was a musician, a rapper, some sort of performance, they would do it like afterwards. So like the show wouldn't start until like 11 o'clock at night. But they would just be like, oh, usually, especially when a show's like at a bar, people might not want to leave immediately, especially if it's to them still like early in the night. They're not going to want to leave. And so they would just do like 3 matches and that would be it. And I think with the way Negative Outlook is doing it, I think works even better because it'll be like band performance, burlesque performance, wrestling match, band performance, burlesque, wrestling match. And so you kind of get a little bit of everything. And so if the burlesque isn't for you, you've got the wrestling. If the wrestling isn't for you, you might be there for the concert. And the crowd's just there to have a fun time and watch ridiculous shenanigans happen. And so, yeah, I did one a couple weeks ago, and it was their first intergender match that they've had. And to me, that's like normal at this point. I was joking with some of the people on the show that day, because I think that was like right when the PWI Women's 250 had come out. And I was like, yeah, guys, even if I submitted my information, I couldn't even get on the women's list because I wrestle more dudes than I do girls at this point. And apparently that's a criteria to be on the women's 250 is that you have to be wrestling more women or non-binary people than intergender matches. And I was like, well, that takes me out of the running. And then the regular list is 500. I was like, I'm not going to be on that one either.
So how did that come about for you? Like, how do you end up wrestling more intergender matches than just like straight up women's matches? Like, was that something that you were just always interested in, or is it just something you kind of fell into?
I think it's just something that I kind of fell into my first couple years of indie wrestling, especially because at the time I was in Florida. And I feel like it probably still happens in like specific regions and stuff, depending on where you are. But especially being a woman, you'll usually come up and there'll usually only be a handful of other girls in the area to where you're just going to wrestle the same 3 people all the time. So like I wrestled plenty, and then I can't even remember what my first intergender match was. It was probably a show in Florida. It was probably like some scramble match. And like, to me, it's always just been like, I'm just having a wrestling match. I don't care who it's with. Like, we're gonna do like, they're gonna another wrestler that's gonna have different moves than the wrestler that I wrestled yesterday. Like, that's all it is. We're just gonna have different moves, and we might have a different gimmick, and like, that's literally gonna be it. And so I just feel like as time has gone on, and maybe just because I'm immediately comfortable with it, and it's never been something that's been weird or like shunned in my perspective of where I've come through and everything like that, it's always just been, yeah, it's just another wrestling match. So to me, it's just normal at this point. But I would say over the last couple years, my main thing with my wrestling career is just trying to have fun and going to places that I wouldn't normally get to go to. Like I said, wrestling in West Virginia, or going to Salt Lake City, Utah, and doing shows out there. Like, they're just not places that people might not always think of as like hotbed for wrestling. Right. But I get to go wrestle in states that people probably don't get to wrestle in. And so I'm always open. And I even remember, this was probably years ago, probably 2016, 2017. I remember I was even talking to a promoter in Mississippi for a show. They were wanting to have me come out there, and I was like, hey, that's a long trip for one person. Like, I got to have other people with me. And they were like, well, we would just need you to bring a girl to wrestle. And that was always a thing, too, is a lot of the times they would just want you to have your own girl to wrestle. And I'm like, what? Yeah. Why is it my job to find somebody? But I remember at one point pitching one of the guys that would have come with me to the show. I was like, oh, we could do like a mixed tag match. And they were immediately like, oh, we could if we have to, but like, we wouldn't want you interacting with the dudes at all or anything like that. And that was 2017, which is weird to say that was like 8 years ago. And so for me, it's always just been, I've never thought twice about it. Yeah. And I think especially with some of these no-ring shows, it's still one of those things where people probably have this preconceived idea that a girl wouldn't want to do a show like that. And to me, I'm like, it's another show. It doesn't matter. I'll do it. No problem. And then I do the show and I'm the only girl on the show, and all the girls that are there watching think I'm the coolest thing in the world. So like, I think I'm doing okay regardless.
Aspyn, how would you describe your in-ring style?
Oh gosh, I do a lot of shenanigans. Yeah. I feel like I just want people to have a good time. And like, from the different experiences I've had in different places and different promotions, I've kind of like learned and like adapted my style to be kind of like all encompassing, to where I can have a cool submission that some person who is really into technical stuff would really like. But then I can also pull out a hook, line, and stunner and know that some dude who hasn't watched wrestling in 15 years is still going to know what a Stone Cold Steve Austin stunner is. Right. And so they're going to think that's cool. And then I just incorporate my love of anime and all things cute into it. And I just think I got some cool technical stuff that the dudes would want, but then I'm cute and adorable and I'm fighting other dudes, and the females watching the show are going to think that's the coolest thing ever, regardless of what I do. But I just want people to have a good time, whether they're cheering me or they're booing me. If they're interacting with me, I think I'm doing my job.
Yeah. So your style is like, it's very fluid and responsive to like what the kind of you're feeling from the crowd.
Yeah, for sure. In the No Ring show we did a couple weeks ago, I had a chair at one point, and we hadn't talked about anything for me using a chair. And one of the guys, Reese Hayes, was just on the ground on all fours. And I was like, this crowd would really love it if I just sat here and spanked him with this chair. And lo and behold, they did. And then afterwards, Reese was like, hey, that was really cool thinking. I'm like, I feel like because, and maybe this might just be in my opinion, other people might not think it, but I feel like because regardless of me being in wrestling, I've always just enjoyed wrestling, especially indie wrestling. So I feel like when it comes to how I work, I'm putting into perspective what I would want to see as a fan, what I think would be funny or look really cool or look really devastating or whatever. And I just kind of do that. And I think that kind of helps. But then like my first 3-4 years ish of wrestling, a majority of it, I was just a manager. So I was always getting the outside perspective. And I definitely think that helped, because then I was right there with the fans, seeing how they were interacting with what was happening in the ring. And I was also learned how to kind of like be quick on my feet, especially when it came to interacting with said fans. Because that's not a part you can really go over, because you don't know what these people are going to do or how they're going to perceive something or how they're going to react to it. And so you kind of have to be quick on your feet in those instances. And so I definitely think that helped me in how I wrestle. But I also just take like bits and pieces from other people that I enjoy. And I've always loved technical wrestling. I've always thought it was really cool. And granted, I'm not a technical wizard. I don't have a collegiate background. I can't do 50,000 holds or anything like that. But I have some that I do, and I think it's really fun. And I think it kind of helps separate like how I wrestle from other people.
In going to as many wrestling shows as I do, I've noticed that it can be tough to get crowds to actually participate these days. I don't know if this is like a post-pandemic thing where like we somehow lost the recipes in how to get crowds to actually interact with the shows. When you're wrestling, what is like the kind of responses that you like to hear from the crowds? Do you like a good clapping session? Do you enjoy the chants? Do you think we should introduce air horns to American wrestling culture?
No, like, air horns. What is it?
No, you don't want the toot, 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 toot.
I don't trust us. I'd say anywhere else, yes. I don't trust Americans to be civil with them.
That's fair.
Because unfortunately, I think, and granted, it's probably more at the like larger scale in the TV shows and stuff like that, but I do feel like the crowds will try to like hijack it.
That's fair. I've been watching Libre and I'm just getting a little jealous. That's
yeah. But then also, I don't even expect us to be in tune with each other. Everybody's just going to be hitting the horn whenever they feel like it, and it's not going to sound in sync. We're going to all be offbeat, and it's not going to be a good time.
When you wrestle, do you find yourself wanting to do the slap the turnbuckle to get the crowd, or you stomp your feet to cry and get them to clap? Because I feel like I'm seeing that more and more.
I think the stomping of the feet might happen here and there, but that's like if they're beating me up and they're like have me in a hold or something, and that's just like instinctively, like I feel like it's one of those things that we kind of just learn naturally. But I feel like I just try to engage with the crowd, and even if it's not something big, I still try to make it something to where they feel a part of the show, because I feel like that's when fans really get into it, is when they feel like they're also kind of a part of it with you, and that there's not like this big divide between the two. But I would say I personally like a chant, because I feel like clapping is just, it's easy, but like a lot of the times I feel like the clapping is one of those things where if the wrestlers try to get people to clap for them in the ring, the crowd just kind of does it because they feel bad. Because there's definitely been instances where they'll try to get a clap going and you can tell the crowd doesn't really care, but they're doing it because they kind of feel like they have to.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like a chant is usually more natural and actually shows like what they're interested in or who they want or anything like that. Or I just try to engage with the kiddies, with the children. Because no matter what, even when I was a manager for the first couple years, I've always had different color hair. And even though I was a bad guy, I was awful. I was a terrible manager. I was a mean person, but I couldn't be mean to the kids. And then I would have a little 6-year-old girl coming up to me telling me, I really like your blue hair. And I was like, I'm not going to be mean to them. So like, I'm going to be nice to this kid that's complimenting my hair. And I feel like that no matter what, the kids would think I was cool because I had colored hair. So I definitely think also I feel like with some indie wrestling too, I feel like they should kind of take the TV route and really just try to like interact with the younger audience, because they're not that hard to please. Like, yeah, they might see some flips and they'll think it's really cool, but you doing a 10-minute back and forth with a bunch of moves that they've never seen, they're going to be really overwhelmed and they're only going to digest like 2 things that happen. And so I think engaging with the kids and stuff like that definitely helps. But yeah, I think I'm personally, I think I'm a chant person more than anything.
That is honestly some of my favorite stuff to see at some of the local shows. It's just like when the kids get super into it because they have like no filter and they're standing on their chairs and they're just like going crazy. Yeah.
They're just happy to be there.
It's like I would rather have like the kids in the front row than the dudes who are just going to be there like arms folded.
That look like they don't want to be there.
Yeah. There's a lot of wrestling fans. They go to shows and they just watch it like it's TV. And I'm like, you know, you're there. They can hear you. You can make a little noise. So yeah, I asked my Discord if they had any questions for you. And we got one from Flappy787 who would like to know, Aspyn, what's a typical day of a match like for you? Do you have any special routines or rituals that you feel would help you prepare before a match?
I don't really have like a ritual per se. As I've been around for a little bit, I've obviously gotten like more comfortable. And so I don't really like think too many things. There's definitely certain instances where I've been like more nervous than others. Like I wrestled Sue Young like a year and a half ago, and that was a big deal for me because I've known Sue as long as I've been wrestling. And Sue was like my second match ever, and it was like a tag match back in Florida. And then I wrestled her out in Washington like a year and a half ago. And so like to me, that was just that like nerves, because I was like, oh man, I really hope I've improved since my second match ever and I wrestled her, and I just wanted to like do good by her and stuff like that. But for the most part, like I usually feel okay. I think my main thing, which won't be shocking, especially to anyone who like watches my streams, is I will probably have an Alani or an energy drink.
Oh, okay.
That's just normal at this point. But I don't have anything too crazy. I usually will like go over things and then I'll distract myself. And then I'll go over things again and kind of like go in and out of thinking about it. So I'm not like sitting there and like over analyzing everything. But then I also think like when my music hits and I hear it and then I'm like, okay. And then especially because, again, with getting crowd into things, I feel like my song, I use the Japanese version of Say So by Doja Cat. But I use a Japanese cover of it.
That's so funny. I didn't even realize it was in Japanese.
Yep. It's just a Japanese version. It's like such an easy clap along song. So that's already something very easy for the crowd to get into. So then like as soon as I hear it, then I'm immediately like pumped and I'm like ready to go. And then I'm usually just out there and I just kind of comes like second nature. But I don't have anything too crazy. I'm not sitting here like smacking myself in the face, or I'm not somebody who can like sit and like put headphones on. I know like some people will do that and they'll sit there and like zone out for like 20 minutes and like listen to music. I'm not really that kind of person, because at least for me, I think what helps me stay level-headed and be calm is talking with other people, even if I'm not even talking anything about my match, just because then it just feels like a normal moment in time or like a normal day, and not like I'm doing something special to where I then don't get in my head about it.
What is your favorite match that you've had so far?
Probably teaming with Act. I would say that one, because we did, the last one we had was a tag match, and it was me and her against Shaza McKenzie and Delmi Exo at Kitsune. So that was a big one for me. But I've had a handful of scrambles that I really like, even when I was back in Florida. Wrestling Sue was obviously, like I said, it was a really big deal for me just because it was kind of like a full circle moment. So yeah, I would say anything where I teamed with Act, or probably my match with Sue, or a one that I usually throw back to because it's like easily up on YouTube. I have a match with Danny Jordan from 2020 in Action Wrestling in Georgia. And that was a fun one. I really enjoyed that match. Yeah, I would probably say, yeah, those are probably like my top threes. Anything or I teamed with Act, my match with Sue, or that match with Danny, just because that's when that always sticks out to me. And because it's so easily available for people to watch it on YouTube, it's always a good one to just throw people to. Be like, hey, go watch that one. I think I do okay with that one.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, you brought up Sue Young because I feel like she's forever altered my pro wrestling like vernacular, because whenever I think of Sue Young, I think of her in TNA going, professional wrestle me right now. Like, that to me lives rent free in my head. And when I am being, when I am being a nuisance to some of the heels in wrestling, and I like to shout things, if they get too mouthy, like if I feel like they're just like cutting a promo in the middle of their match, I like to just start shouting like, will you just shut up and professional wrestle already? Will you professional wrestle that man?
Yeah, you have to make sure you put the professional in there.
Yeah, because listen. We're not here to watch no amateur wrestling. I don't want to see amateurs. If I want to see that, I'll go wrestle my brother out in the alley in the back, and that's about as amateur as it gets. I'm here to see the professionals. I'll throw him on the couch. Yeah. Don't let anyone take that away from you, Aspyn. You're a professional wrestler.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. There's some out here amateur wrestling. Oh my God. Get over yourself.
I beat up an amateur wrestler in my no ring match.
Maybe that's what separates the amateur from the professional. You don't need a ring to wrestle. Nope. Yeah. Get on the level of the pros. Aspyn, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I really appreciate it. Do you have anything that you would like to promote? Where can the people find you?
I'm on everything pretty much at Aspyn the Mermaid, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, the whole 9 yards. In case you don't know, I stream on Twitch Friday through Mondays at 6 p.m. Eastern. We've only recently dabbled into watching wrestling. I've never because to me, it's always been, we have Effie and we have Speedball. We have other people who wrestle and watch wrestling. So I've never thought about doing it, but it was a sub goal we had last month. And chat really enjoyed it. And I really, like I mentioned, I really enjoy my mid-2000s ridiculous indie wrestling. So we've decided that whenever a WWE pay-per-view is happening, we will instead watch our own wrestling.
Hell yeah. Got to kind of program the Fed, brother.
Yeah, but I also play video games. Like we talked about JRPGs and open world games and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm mostly on Twitch. That No Ring show was the last show I had for the year. And yeah, but I'm pretty much on everything at Aspyn the Mermaid. I try to make it nice and easy for everybody.
Aspyn, thank you. Thank you so
Thanks.
much.
Yes, I had fun.
All right. Thank you so much to Aspyn Rose for joining us here today. Be sure to follow her on all her socials linked in the description of this episode. And that will do it for SabreTalk this week. We'll be back next week with something, I'm sure. And remember, pro wrestling is for everyone, and pro wrestling can be